and inbound right and heavy from the Stevenson to Roosevelt. Right lane closed with construction. One lane on the ramp from the Stevenson. It's 20 minutes, 95th into downtown. Also, Lakeshore Drive southbound heavy Montrose to Fullerton with construction in the left lane. 22 minutes, Hollywood to Monroe. That's traffic. I'm Jeremy Scott on AM560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. AM560 Weather Center forecast, sunny and highs in the upper 70s. 73 right now at O'Hare. Next news at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by The Insurance Guy. Tune in Saturday afternoons 4 to 5 for The Insurance Guy with Steve Lischewitz, president of SVL Insurance Group.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. And yesterday, day one of the Democrat Socialist National Convention. And they trotted out the big guns, including the big sentimental plays.
It was Unity Day, by the way, Dan. It had a theme.
More like Union Day, because they use tactics the Chicago Teachers Union uses when they're on strike or refusing to go back to work and still wanting to get paid. And that is to trot out kids to do their heavy lifting for them. That's sort of what the Democrats did on the matter of further politicizing the virus and trying to ascribe the blame for the damage the virus has caused in terms of the cost of human life and sickness. Bringing out Kristen Urquiza, whose dad unfortunately passed away. Her dad's 65 years old. They're Arizona residents.
And she lives in San Francisco now, but he died in Arizona.
Passed away from COVID-19, and this is who she blames for his passing.
My dad was a healthy 65-year-old. His only pre-existing condition was trusting Donald Trump, and for that, he paid with his life.
And his last words before he died on his deathbed.
One of the last things that my father said to me was that he felt betrayed by the likes of Donald Trump. And so when I cast my vote for Joe Biden, I will do it for my dad.
Not there.
Well, it's an odd thing. I don't begrudge her grieving over her father's loss, but it's an odd thing that if your dad is breathing his last breaths, that you're talking about President Trump. Doesn't seem like a moment for such a thing. She also offered some tells just in terms of the politicization here, maybe some help from DNC scriptwriters. Listen to the way she talks about her dad's death and the sharing of it, how that brought her to prominence in order to advocate on behalf of others.
Once I told my story, a lot of people reached out to me to share theirs. They asked me to help them keep their communities safe, especially communities of color, which have been disproportionately affected. They asked me, a normal person, to help.
Yeah.
Because Donald Trump won't.
Right. And then she goes full John Edwards.
The coronavirus has made it clear that there are two Americas. The America that Donald Trump lives in and the America that my father died in.
Yeah, the grieving daughter, again, don't begrudge her grieving over her father's death. But the whole thing struck me as a bit unseemly and a bit staged, I would say. And this, again, was touted as one of the highlights of the evening by the Democrat Socialists, of course, in addition to the First Lady's speechifying.
Well, this wasn't unity. This was blaming. And that's what Michelle Obama's speech was about, too. Just ripping on Trump.
Well, sure.
Taking him down. A rhetorical takedown was the headline this morning.
Yeah, for unity, you had to go to the old dirt road and find John Kasich.
Because we're being taken down the wrong road by a president who is pitted one against the other. He's unlike all of our best leaders before him, who worked to unite us, to bridge our differences, and lead us to a united America.
Yeah, okay, Jason Aldean. Here's the thing. John Kasich is one of these hack politicians who imagines an America that never existed. A free society is not a uniform society. A free society, therefore, is not a united society. We have values in common. Mm-hmm. We have protections in common. But this idea that we're unified in some abstract way over the salient issues of the day and which direction to take them is just fiction. It's always been fiction. It's just a different sort of kindergarten talk than you got from Michelle Obama. And I just have no tolerance for it. And I didn't have any tolerance for it when John Kasich was a member of Congress or had his little show on Fox News or was a presidential candidate either. I find him completely insufferable. This is a guy who will use biblical verse to defend Medicaid expansion. All right, that is the definition of political hackery. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by our on-again, off-again colleague, Steve Cortes, host of the Steve Cortes Show, 5 p.m. On our airwaves, taking a leave, as you have now, I'm sure by now heard, through the election to serve as one of the communications consultants, aides, surrogates for the president. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, you bet. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Morning. So on the matter of John Kasich, obviously much has been made about that because there you go, Republican governor, longtime Republican member of Congress, and he's very proud of his GOP heritage, but he just can't abide Trump and so on and so forth. And this is supposed to be a big moment for Biden and the Democrats.
Right. Well, first I have to say that the staging of him at a literal fork in the road was just laughable.
Very subtle. Very subtle.
Right, exactly. But on top of that, I mean, you're just so ham-handed. But more importantly, I think on top of that, he's being described constantly by corporate media as a prominent Republican. Now, I think if you were to take the John Kasich wing of the Republican Party in its entirety, it could probably fit very easily into a Dairy Queen, if not into a booth at a Dairy Queen. This is a man utterly without constituency in the 2020 Republican Party, and that is because he is the very definition of the Washington establishment. The Washington establishment, which was overthrown electorally in 2016 by the America First movement. I was interviewed by PBS yesterday, and I think they were just shocked that I said this. They asked me about Kasich. I said, I would be very concerned if Kasich actually supported Donald Trump. That would be worrying to me because it would tell me that we're not following through on our America First economic nationalist principles. Because, again, he's the definition of the Washington establishment, which was fairly bipartisan. There really wasn't much party regarding the groups to which John Kasich belongs. So I'm glad he doesn't approve of the president. I think it actually helps us in the end. And then they trotted out some other folks who, frankly, I'd never heard of. One of whom, Susan Molinari, is a Russian lobbyist, literally paid millions of dollars to lobby for the Russians. So it was a pathetic attempt to try to show that there's disunity in the Republican Party. Polling shows exactly the opposite. This president is amazingly popular within the party.
Well, what did you make of Michelle Obama, the former First Lady's attack on Trump? Because that's not normally the role of the First Lady, I'll tell you that.
No, sure. Normally the First Lady makes Netflix documentaries or goes on book tours. Yeah.
Look, not unexpected. I think both the First Lady's speech and, frankly, a lot of the 2 hours last night, and I did force myself to watch all of it because I knew I'd have to talk about it on TV and on radio like this. A lot of it was really, to be perfectly honest, rather than a celebration of America, it was an indictment of America. They described our country in ways that were unrecognizable to me as somebody who very proudly lives in this country. They described this dystopian, racist hellscape. And my answer to that would be on a couple of levels. Number one, this is the greatest country in the world in which to be a racial or ethnic minority. And I don't really think that that's very disputable. And I, by the way, say this as an Hispanic. There's no better place to be a non-dominant or non-white person in the case of our society than the United States of America. Secondly, I would say, as proof that we are not remotely a systemically racist place, hundreds of millions of people all over the world, most of them not white, most of them not in countries like Norway, absolutely yearn to come to the United States and would do it at the snap of a finger if afforded the opportunity. So the Democrats apparently think all of these people are fools for wanting so desperately to become Americans. Again, if the reality that they describe were true, which of course it is not. And so it was depressing, I think, in a lot of ways. It was almost like a telethon. And it's not remotely the vision that I think we're going to see next week during the Republican convention of, we're a country with a lot of problems right now, problems which are caused by the Chinese Communist Party, but we're a country that is essentially good and strong and rising.
One of the other most uncomfortable moments of the night for me, in addition to John Kasich taking it a little bit too much on the nose with his imagery, was Andrew Cuomo's speechifying, and this was probably the work product of he and Freda staying up all night to come up with a metaphor. The metaphor being your buddy Chris Cuomo there. The metaphor being that the virus is a metaphor for American politics. The virus being the divisiveness in American politics that is infecting the body politic. And he talked about, but the key part of that was not getting lost in that metaphor, was that the immune system is government. And I thought that that's such an important distinction to make. Remember, this is a party that is completely government-centric, is completely focused on winning this election so they can use your money to bail out their friends in government at every level, not so that they can create a better environment for you to right-size yourself and your family after 6 months of on-again, off-again lockdowns. That seems to me like a real point of contrast between the two.
Oh, absolutely. And look, let's be honest here. This was just the height of hypocrisy for the Democrats to have the gall to showcase Andrew Cuomo. I mean, of anybody they could have picked, to showcase Andrew Cuomo as somehow the exemplar of how to handle and how to deal with the virus. Because you're right, their answer always is government. Well, let's look at how his government, how did New York State handle this virus? Let's look at the actual data. If New York State were a country, it would be the second worst country on earth, next to only New Jersey, if it were a country, in terms of death rate. And by the way, by a mile, I mean by an extremely wide margin. Those two states put together are 10% of the U.S. population. They are 30% of the U.S. deaths. The fact that Andrew Cuomo forced knowingly infected patients back into nursing homes created killing centers in the state of New York. And yet, he has the temerity, he has the arrogance to come on the air and lecture us, the rest of the country, about what we should do. And by the way, I'd also point this out in terms of contrast, let's take it back just domestically between the U.S. states. Florida, which has roughly the same population as New York, has a much older population than New York. Florida, which has been routinely maligned among mainstream media mavens for its treatment of the virus, their death rate is 1/4 of New York's. So if we want to take lessons in leadership about how to deal with the virus, I want to hear from Ron DeSantis, not from Cuomo. But again, this shows their arrogance. It shows the disconnect from reality. And I think it also shows the condescension that they have toward the people, that we're unable to know this and to discern this actual truth of what you say is so different from what you did.
Yeah, there's something else about that, too. There's just like looking at the COVID data in the state-by-state comparison and to try to debunk the gaslighting the media is doing. The other aspect of it is even simpler, which is, it's funny, Florida is such a catastrophe, right? Well, ask the 20% of Manhattan that left New York State for Florida. Ask the Chicagoans who've left Chicago for Florida or for Arizona. Arizona, Florida, Texas, these are the bad states. Well, those are the states that are going to be picking up members of Congress after the census. And the great states, New York, Illinois, California, are losing members of Congress. So what does that say? Everybody's wrong except you and the governors of those respective states? I don't think so.
Right. No, it's a great point. People make rational choices, and they vote with their feet. We know that better than anybody, unfortunately, in the city of Chicago and in the state of Illinois. And you're exactly right. Governor Cuomo, by the way, it was a pathetic video, if you happen to see it, where he was literally begging wealthy people to come back. He said, I'll buy you a drink, I'll make you dinner, as if that's the problem, as if they need a free dinner.
I'll take you out. I mean, it's so goofy.
Yeah, it's incredible. But, and listen, let's just be honest about it. It is a tragedy, right, that New York City, which is the de facto capital of the world, has been completely hollowed out. And before anybody thinks that I'm throwing stones, things are not any better in Chicago. I think these cities are not just done for the coming weeks and months. I fear that they are going to be done for years, if not decades, because of what has happened, because of the complete mismanagement in both cases, de Blasio in New York City and Lightfoot in Chicago. By the way, when I saw her come on the screen last night, oh my gosh, I mean, I threw up in my mouth a little bit. I was like, are they really trotting out Lori Lightfoot? I mean, again, of all the mayors, of all the governors, they decide Cuomo, the worst record by far.
Well, she wants a cabinet position, I heard.
Well,
it'd be it'd be a way to get her out of Chicago.
It was hard to stomach, I will tell you that. I was on Laura Ingram's show afterward, and I was so hoping that I could work in. We just didn't get to Lightfoot, unfortunately. It was mostly about Michelle Obama, but I was dying to make a point of, again, the arrogance and the total disconnect, the cognitive dissonance of saying we're going to ignore what's going on in your city. That Chicago, as we know all too well, Chicago has become a third world-like city, and I am trying to warn the country as a Chicagoan. It gives me no glee to say this. Where the left wants to take the country nationally is where Chicago is right now. And that has to be an impossibility for our country because Chicago is a place of danger and deprivation. It is a third world-like city in the middle of America. It has been managed by the Democrats for a century. It has been utterly mismanaged by, I primarily put the blame on two people, Kim Foxx and Lori Lightfoot today. And yet the Democratic Party chose to honor and highlight that very failure of a leader.
Yeah, and while she was speaking, a 14-year-old was shot in the head, a 9-year-old's head was grazed by a bullet, and a 13-year-old was shot in the chest just last night, within 2 hours of each other.
I think Lori Lightfoot could be to Kamala Harris what Tyrion Lannister was to Cersei Lannister. Do you see that? You see how she could be the? Did you watch Game of Thrones, Steve?
Oh, I didn't. I was going to say I don't know what you're talking about.
It's okay. I didn't either.
Who doesn't watch Game of Thrones? What's wrong with you people?
Well, I don't have time. We're doing things.
Oh, please.
I'm trying to reelect the president.
Yeah, Dan, lay off him.
I know. You two are, holding Western civilization on your shoulders.
Yeah.
Okay,
How did you know?
Yes, right. All right, Steve. Steve Cortes, host of the Steve Cortes Show, on assignment for the Trump campaign through November 3rd. He'll be back after. And, by the way, I forgot. He's coming to town again on Thursday night. It's me, him, and His Eminence, Dennis Prager, for Cigar Night at the Humidor in Lisle, as we've been talking about. 560theanswer.com/cigar if you want to sign up for the live stream pay-per-view, $12 for that event. Me, Steve, and Dennis. It should be a good time, Steve, on Thursday.
Can't wait for it. See you in a couple days.
And I'll be parking cars out front. And Steve Cortes joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM560. The Answer.
Hiring can be challenging, but ZipRecruiter makes it fast and easy. We talked to COO Dylan Miskowitz, who needed to hire a director of coffee for his company, Cafe Altura.
We would look through lots of applications for people who were not qualified. It definitely felt like we were looking for a needle in a haystack.
So Dylan started using ZipRecruiter and found his perfect candidate in a few days. ZipRecruiter's powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply, which is why